All right, what's going on, guys? So Jagex just announced a bunch of balance changes for Necromancy, and they announced a change to critical strikes for the other combat styles. So this video is going to look at all of that and kind of give you my thoughts, as well as giving you a breakdown of exactly what's going on. Because obviously a lot of numbers are getting lowered and some numbers are getting raised, but without contextualizing that it might not be clear exactly what's going on. So first, we're going to talk about the combat beta. What's going to happen here is base crit chance for all styles is going to go up from 5 to 10%. This is pretty big. This is a massive deal, so good stuff here. Hit cap increasing to 30,000. This is going to be really good for all the styles. The style that's going to benefit the most is obviously melee. I'm not entirely sure what this is going to mean for Langs and for a Grimoire, but keep that in mind. With regard to damage ranges, as it stands now, applying the new crit system to damage ranges is going to feel really weird. When we look at an ability like Binding Shot, the minimum hit is 20% ability damage, and the maximum hit is 100% ability damage. If you roll a minimum hit that crits, this will do less damage than a 40% roll that doesn't crit. That's a little weird. Now, Jagex is planning on readjusting the damage ranges anyways, so just be aware that at first, when you're doing the beta, you're going to see some crits that are like not making any sense, and it's going to feel weird to get crits that are hitting less damage than non-crits. So just be aware that is going to change. The biggest thing is going to be when your Saren Godbow does the thing where you get Ruby Bolts and it procs on the first arrow and all 5 of your arrows hits. Your Saren Godbow is just going to be a tactical nuke. It's going to be absolutely nuts. So look forward to that if you have a Saren Godbow. Big things to keep an eye on. Max crit chance for magic is going to go up to 41% with Reaver's Ring. This could open up Armadale Battlestaff as a potential spec weapon, especially if they rebalance the damage range, because right now it's 90 to 450 over 5 hits. If that gets changed to something a little bit more reasonable with a tighter spread, this could be very, very, very good. Max crit chance for range going up to 43%. That's just really good. A lot of this stuff is just going to be really, really good. This change with, I think it's Deathport arrows, it gives 3% crit chance. Stalker's Ring gives 4% with the enchantment. And then you get base 36% from just all of the other crit buffs. If you know a good crit rotation for ranged, you're going to be having a good time. This is a lot of damage. Beyond that, melee is getting its one thing that held it back. Well, the one major thing that held it back from being the burstiest style, which is hit caps. Getting that removed means that melee is going to be really nuts at a lot of places where burst damage in particular is going to be really important. My guess is that with these changes, hybriding is going to be best in slot again at all the places where you would hybrid. So just keep that in mind. These are things that it's hard to know without getting my hands on them, but on paper, these seem like the big 3 things to look out for. Moving on, we have Vengeful Ghost. So the base healing amount was reduced by 40%. However, Vengeful Ghost healing is going to change from an on-attack proc to an on-hit proc. What this means is that on-attack is when Vengeful Ghost rolls its damage number. That's what your healing was based on. So nothing could increase your Vengeful Ghost's healing outside of its own damage. Now, all of your damage increases will increase your Vengeful Ghost healing because the healing is going to be based on the actual number of damage it's dealing. So Haunt will increase it by 10%. Vulnerability will increase it by 10%. This number will be going down from 175 to 145 against enemies that you're just using Vuln on. This is not that bad. This is what, like a 18% reduction in healing? You're probably not going to notice it, in all honesty. Against Racial, because you're going to have Salve Amulet and Undead Slayer, this is probably going to be healing you more. Now, your kills are going to be a little bit slower. Well, not a little bit. They're going to be meaningfully slower, but because you're going to be healing so much more, your food consumption is probably going to be around the same or a little bit worse, but this isn't going to be like substantially worse. Against anywhere where you can use Salve Amulet and Undead Slayer, the healing's probably going to be more, and then everywhere else, it's going to be slightly less. Not anything really worth worrying about. This change is totally fine. And honestly, it's probably necessary. If you care about game balance, the Vengeful Ghost was clearly the strongest part of Necromancy, and it's not close. Okay. Skeleton Warrior is going to be doing 16 reduced damage with no rage stacks. And then with max rage stacks, it's going to be doing about 11% damage. This is like a ballpark guess, but it's going to be doing around 13% less damage. Again, not going to notice this. Now, Putrid Zombie is getting nuked from orbit. This seems really heavy-handed. The -3 base duration, this doesn't matter at all. Move speed increase to running, this is really big, especially against mobile bosses. A lot of times your Putrid Zombie will just kind of walk around and not do anything, especially if a boss is moving around a lot. It's really annoying, so this change, really, really good. The poison damage was reduced by 66%. That is a colossal nerf. Not only that, it was reduced from proccing 33.3 times per minute to 20 times per minute. Overall, this adds up to an 80% reduction in damage. Not only that, the poison can't proc Cinderbanes anymore, which means that the fact that this does poison damage at all is kind of irrelevant. The poison damage is going to be around a 4,300 damage per minute, which is basically zero if you're bossing. In an AoE, this kind of matters. If you're doing Abyssal Beasts, this is up to 21,500 damage per minute. They basically just removed the poison damage. This is a lot. There's just no other way to explain it. This is absolutely insane nerf. Beyond that, Haunt is going to last only 30 seconds. Also, before we get into Haunt, summoning Putrid Zombie, activating Haunt, and summoning Vengeful Ghost, it's all going to be free. Those are massive changes. Can't be understated how big those are. In terms of quality of life, huge. Absolutely huge. Especially at long boss fights like Solak and Virago and AOD in smaller teams where you really want to be resummoning your guys like 2 or 3 or 4 times every single fight. At Virago, it didn't matter as much because you got a free resummon between phases anyways, but at places like Solak where you don't have a ton of downtime, it's really good to just get these for free. Same thing at AOD. You only really need 1 or 2 resummons over the course of a fight, especially if you're killing it faster than you only need 1. But having this not cost any adrenaline, massive. So now, Haunt lasts 30 seconds instead of forever. This doesn't matter. You're going to lose 1 global cooldown if you're like in a fight. And if you have downtime, it's just free to refresh it. So not a big deal. The damage is being lowered dramatically from 100% of base damage up to a cap of 35% bonus damage, down to 10% of base damage up to a cap of 20% bonus damage. Before actually getting into the numbers, we need to talk about why this is happening. The issue with Haunt is that it is monopolizing the power budget for Necromancy. What that means is that whenever the devs are thinking about adding more stuff to Necromancy, they need to consider that Haunt is giving 780 damage to whatever they're doing. So if they want to release an ability that does 4,000 damage, they actually need to release an ability that does 3,220 damage because Haunt exists. Not only that, Haunt increases poison damage and it increases your skeleton's damage. So Haunt is really nuts. This is far and away the most broken thing about Necromancy. So if we want to get more power back into Necromancy, which we're probably getting a fourth Conjure very soon, and we may see, a greater Death Skulls or something like that soon. If those things are to happen, Haunt has to get nerfed, period. No other way of looking at it. Now, we're actually going to look at the numbers. So, for context, all ability ranges will use the average damage value. And then just keep in mind, if you roll on the lower end of the damage range, you're going to get more effective damage reduction. If you roll on the higher end, or if you crit, you'll get less effective damage reduction. So the current cap for Haunt without any buffs, I don't know if it includes your overloads. So this is just the pre-overload numbers, is 780. The new cap is 446. For your basic attacks, this is going to be an 18.5% damage reduction. This is pretty big because that's not only your basic attacks, but it's Soul Sap and Touch of Death, so all share the same damage range. So all of those abilities doing about 18.5% less damage, that's going to be pretty noticeable. Your Omniguard Enhanced Auto Attack is doing 6.3% less damage. You're not going to notice this. Period. That's not big of a number for you to notice. That's pretty much all there is to it. Now, Bloat is getting nuked pretty hard. Bloat is going, your initial hit is getting reduced by around 11% damage, but your damage over time is getting reduced by 43%. So, because this hits 10 times, your top end damage is going down from like 21,000 down to around 12,000. Or like 13,000. So this is a massive decrease in damage. So just be aware, Bloat's going to be a lot worse. It's not unusable, especially because your Bloat ticks still proc Cinderbanes. They still count for Blitz Soul, but Bloat is going to be a lot worse. Death Skulls are going to do around 5% less damage. Finger of Death is going to do around 4.5% a little less damage. Basically, the trend here is going to be your harder hitting moves are going to feel about the same, and then your weaker moves are going to feel substantially worse. This is really shown with Skeleton Warrior. With no rage, your damage is going down by 54%, and then at max rage, your damage is going down by 46%. This is nuts. This is a ton of damage reduction. I think I remember hearing that Skeleton Warrior does around 150k damage per minute. So this is basically going down to like 75k damage per minute. Colossal nerf, can't be understated. Beyond that, poison damage is also going to be reduced by around 40%. This makes sense. The fact that because of Haunt, Necromancy basically got a mini Bic Arrows effect, probably not balanced, probably has to get nerfed. It sucks, has to happen. But yeah, so these are all of the important abilities. I didn't go over your tier 90 weapon spec because if you use like 2 more Necrosis stacks, you'll just get the same damage as you did before. So not to say that it's not getting reduced damage, but the damage reduction is like 2 or 3% down to 0% if you crit, because if you crit, you're hitting your 30k anyways. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Same thing with Finger of Death. If your Finger of Death is critting and you're in Living Death, this damage reduction is going to be 2 to 3% down to like 0%. So now to wrap up, I'm just going to go over my personal thoughts on the changes. In terms of the combat beta, it's hard to know until the damage ranges also get rebalanced because of the issue we talked about before. But the things that I would keep my eye on are melee being even better at Virago. It's probably possible that melee is going to be able to solo P5 without getting hit by Virago a single time. That's probably not okay, but we'll see. Something else to keep in mind is ranged being very powerful with Saren Godbow and Ruby Bolts. As it stands, that's a lot of work to bring a Ruby Bolt switch, but having a physical Eldritch Crossbow so you can use Saren Godbow spec with Ruby Bolts may be worth looking into. So for those of us who don't have a physical Eldritch Crossbow, maybe look into getting one. Beyond that, it's possible that Magic is just the best style again, but until I personally test a lot of these changes, it's going to be hard for me to have any really strong opinions. The things I would want to look at are melee being good for hybriding and at Virago, range being good with Ruby Bolts, and Magic just being nuts again everywhere, because Crypt Bloom is still really, really good, and it's really, really tanky. Anime Death still makes you pretty tanky at a lot of places, so those are things I would look at. Skeleton nerf on its own seems fine. Ghost healing seems fine. It's a little bit worse sometimes, a little bit better sometimes. All of that's good. The Haunt change is dramatic. Has to happen because Haunt is eating so much of the power budget for Necro. Now, the thing to consider about Haunt is that every ability that ever comes out needs to keep Haunt's damage buff in mind. So because Haunt exists in the state it currently does, we can't get any more bleeds for Necro. We can't get any rapid fire hitting abilities for Necro because their damage is going to be dramatically increased by Haunt, where Haunt shouldn't be Bloat does double damage. Haunt should be Bloat does more damage. Meaningfully more, but not double damage. That's just so much damage. So it makes sense that Haunt is getting nerfed. It sucks for now, but also keep in mind, we're probably getting our 4th Conjure soon, and we may get other Necromancy stuff. I know that Jagex has talked about us maybe getting a Death Skulls change where we get, a greater Death Skulls that has the ramping damage. That might be something that happens. So it's possible that with 4th Conjure and whatever other Necromancy stuff we get from Zemragul and Vorkath, that this is ultimately going to be power neutral, but Haunt has to get nerfed, period. This makes sense. The zombie change seems really excessive. I think if they left zombie alone and just made it so zombies poison can't proc Cinderbanes, I think that would be fine. But man, this feels really bad. Your zombie's going to be doing unironically 90% less damage because it can't proc Cinderbanes also on top of its damage getting reduced. It's man, this is its poison damage basically doesn't matter at this point. So I don't know. That feels really bad. No adrenaline costs on summons and the activations of your abilities. This is nuts. Especially combined with Undead Army. These changes are just absolutely nuts. One thing that you can do is you can cast an ability and then equip Excalibur and re-equip your Lantern and summon Undead Army all in one global cooldown, meaning you don't lose any more damage than you would otherwise. Getting good at that is going to be huge, especially for a lot of the harder bosses. That's a skill you're really going to want to pick up, because being able to do that is just, it's going to be nuts. If you already have to resummon Skeleton and you already have to resummon Putrid Zombie, being able to just, since you're doing that anyways, spend one extra tick to activate your Vengeful Ghost again, I think being able to do this is going to really improve your quality of life at a lot of bosses, and it's going to really improve your kill times, especially once we readjust to the lower damage. Something else to consider about the no adrenaline costs is that there's a lot of bosses where you can't drop aggro effectively, so without bringing training dummies, and that's annoying, and a lot of players just can't be bothered to do that. This ends up being a damage increase in those instances. So notably, at Raksha, between the phase 3 and phase 4 transition, normally you need to resummon all of your guys and then build up 100% adrenaline so that once you collect all of the anima and use your special action, you like have adrenaline to use. The fact that you don't need to spend any adrenaline to summon all of your guys means that you get 100 extra adrenaline and 2 global cooldowns back. So even though we are losing a lot of damage at places like Raksha, it's possible that for that portion of the fight, this ends up being power neutral. I'm not going to know until Monday comes, of course, but that is something to keep in mind as well. Beyond that, the life transfer change is really good, but it is significantly more niche now. One of the big benefits of life transfer is that it helps you save adrenaline. The fact that it doesn't help you save adrenaline means that it's just not as good anymore, and a lot of people are just going to opt out of life transfer entirely. Because I didn't list it earlier in the video, the life transfer change is that it uses your base health now instead of your total max health. So if you wanted to power burst in tank armor and then a life transfer, then your effective cost in health is going to be like 1/6 of your HP, which is really good. The question is that ever worth it? I don't know. But having that option, if you need to power burst something anyways, having that option's not bad. Something to consider. The shield changes seem fine. I've never wanted to use a shield with Necromancy. If you like using Barricade and you want a really long Barricade, cool. If you don't care about that, not cool, I guess. But this probably doesn't matter. It makes sense thematically, but it probably doesn't matter. But yeah, that is pretty much it for the patch notes. If you like the video, feel free to give it a like. And if you like the content, feel free to subscribe to my channel. If you want to support me monetarily, you can become a member. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.